Hello everyone. There has been a lot of buzz around IPOs lately, but today we'll be discussing about an upcoming NFO. We'll be taking a look at DSP Global Innovation Fund. And to take this ahead with us, we have Mr. Sahil Kapoor, who is the Head of Products and Market Strategist at DSP Mutual Fund. Welcome to the show, Sahil.
Thank you, Piyush. Thanks for having me today.
So thank you so much for taking out time, Sahil. Let's get started. So my first question to you is, why Innovation Fund? And can you please explain to our viewers the details of this fund, like an NFO period, the load structure and other things about the fund?
Sure. So innovation, I think, is a very secular theme, although it has become very famous now or in the last 5 years or 10 years, so to speak. I think it has picked up more mind space or eyeballs after I think we went home and started work from home. Before that, I think it was a very, very technical term, or people who knew about it spoke about it. But innovation is a secular theme. So if you go back 100 years, 200 years, innovation is something which has never gone away, right? So when you look at what are the most innovative technologies that has impacted humanity right from the beginning, whether it was a wheel or it was electricity or the internet, you can have many contenders. What we call them as general purpose technologies, a technology which can impact the economy at a very wide scale. It changes how we live, right? So many of these technologies have come about in the last thousands of years. Specifically since 1980s, the internet came about. And when you go back another 100 years from 1880s, innovation really picked up. I look at a certain time period between 1890s to 1920, where you had the automobile, come about. You also had the IC engine come about. You also had the steam engine revolution, industrial revolution. So many things happened together. Then you had a lull phase, and then you had a widespread use of electricity from 1950 onwards, after the Second World War. And then the internet came about. These three were revolutionary in the last 150 years. And then there are many smaller revolutions, like railroad is a revolution. Horizontal fracking of oil, what is called shale oil today or shale gas today. Again, it's a revolution, right? It's an innovation. So many of these innovation come about. What we are seeing after 2000, many new contenders are there on the block, whether it is called a blockchain or a metaverse now in its new avatar, AI, which is coming up at a very rapid scale, a new pace of semiconductors through GPU chips, which is coming up, right? New kind of sustainable energy, which is coming up. So many new contenders are there on the block. They are coming together. So they have critical mass. They are coming at a rapid pace. So they have critical momentum. That's why I think innovation makes a lot of difference now. And that's why a global innovation fund. What we are looking at this fund is we are probably going to start in mid-January. The NFO will start in mid-January, go on for about 2 weeks. Roughly, I think it will be between, let's say, 17th of January and onwards. People can subscribe to it in that period. And the overall cost structure of the fund will be very similar to the best case in the industry. And we'll probably go through more details as we speak.
Yeah. Okay. So Sahil, that was an interesting answer, and that leads me to my next question. Is so what is the philosophy of this fund? The term innovation does sound very intriguing, but how will you explain the term unpredictability associated with something like this?
Absolutely. So I think unpredictability is a important term in investment terminology, right? If there is no unpredictability, the returns will not be there. You will end up having fixed income returns, right? So the unpredictability brings more returns because there are possibility of creating a larger pool of profits, a larger share of, let's say, market. And what innovation does is exactly that. So what innovative companies do is they either create a new market for themselves, or they go and take away the market share from existing players. So for example, think about a company like, food delivery company. Prior to, let's say, 2015-16, very few people would have imagined that there could be a company which will deliver food from all the restaurants, right? So they created a new market for themselves, and then they also created a new ecosystem. Now there are restaurants which are like cloud kitchens. They don't have any seating place. They just serve customers at their home. And why did they come out? Came about because of these food delivery apps and food tech, as it is called, right? So these kind of companies, when they grow in size, and globally there are some companies which have grown tremendously, they capture lion's share of the market. And once they have the market to themselves, their profitability is very, very high. So just to give you one or two numbers, when you look at the big dominators globally right now, for example, a Google, who is a dominator in the search engine space and many other space, Amazon Cloud, a dominator in its own segment. You look at their return ratios of the last 10 years, their ROEs and ROCs are upwards of 20-21%. And their earnings growth for most of these companies is 20% plus, which is higher than best performing emerging market businesses globally. So they not only capture market, they capture it with profitability. And that's why when innovative companies grow to a sizable scale, they become very, very profitable. And that's how they give handsome returns. So to explain the philosophy, this fund looks at three different kind of segments in innovation. One is a dominator who is dominating a segment. You could name a company. You could name, let's say, an Apple, which dominates handset mobile market and many other places in its own segment. There is a company called a young disruptor, a segment which is disrupting and creating either new businesses or disrupting a new space or disrupting an existing space completely, right? Doing it differently. And then there are enablers. Enablers allow these businesses to achieve scale. So for example, a company which writes codes for dominator or a young disruptor, it creates the back end of a business. So these three are core to our fund. So we've designed our fund not basis a sector or a technology, but basis what kind of companies we're going to buy. Either is it a dominator, is it an enabler, or is it a young disruptor? And we've given our fund equal proportion to all these three kind of businesses, and that is the basis and bedrock of our philosophy.
Okay. In fact, Sahil, this gives me a natural segue into my next question, which is an important aspect of the fund. So, would you like to take us through key themes and sectors this fund will invest in?
Absolutely. So, as I said, the basis of the fund is what kind of businesses are we buying, right? It is the three aspects which I told you: dominator, enabler, and the disruptor segment. But when you look at these businesses as a whole, they are present in very varied themes. So, for example, if you pick, let's say, a cloud business, or you pick a artificial intelligence business, there will be businesses which will fit into all these three categories, right? For example, a small gaming company which is creating new games on the metaverse or on the online world, they might be a young disruptor, but some of these companies also support these gaming companies. So they might be enablers in the same universe, right? So what this fund focuses on is figuring out all the three type of businesses in different themes. So to give you a rough idea or rough cut on what different themes do we serve. So we look at semiconductors as a segment, which is, a very large part of our fund, because semiconductor is like the plumbing of the innovation universe. It goes everywhere. You can't do without it. Another theme that we capture very handsomely is again software and IT, a theme which we cannot miss. Third is artificial intelligence and cloud computing, right? Fourth is biotechnology and healthcare, a very, very important stream. Fifth is mobility, where electric vehicles, mobility, and new age tech comes in terms of transportation. Another theme that we capture is industrial robotics, where companies are manufacturing for warehouses and other industrial processes like fast moving industrial goods, right? So these are some of the themes that we are trying to capture, in addition to a very, very important theme, which is fintech and payments, which I think is an upcoming theme. So a mix of all these themes is what Global Innovation Fund is. It is not dependent on a single theme.
Okay. So Sahil, when it comes to differentiation, I heard you mentioned IT. I would like you to elaborate on, how is Global Innovation Fund different from, say, an IT fund?
Right. So I'll give you a answer which is more broader. So when we thought about the innovation theme, first we thought that we want to create a secular theme. We don't want to create a tactical fund which will capture, let's say, a move of 2 to 3 years. So, for example, if I was sitting in 1998 or 97 and I created a IT fund or a fund which takes care of internet, I would have been a success for next 2 3 years. But eventually, that would have turned out to be a bad bet, right? Because that was focused on a very narrow theme. So what we are focusing on is the secular innovation theme across industries. So we are not looking at software or internet as the only theme that we are playing. So as I told you earlier, that there are many different sort of themes that we are trying to play. So the innovation fund is part of a number of sectors, a number of themes. Of course, I think right now the dominant theme is technology because it is let's say entering all the businesses. For example, when you think about auto industry, what comes to your mind? You probably question yourself, the kind of car that I'm driving today, what will it look like when I sit in a car in 2030? It will look very different, right? We all of us know that. So there are questions whether the existing original equipment manufacturers, the auto companies, whether they will survive or not, right? And when you go to a restaurant, you again think about the business model. Are robots going to serve me in the future? When you go and order at a McDonald's or any other company, you see that there is an automated menu. So anywhere you go, you see that there is disruption happening, and that disruption is being driven by technology right now. So technology, of course, will be a large part, but what kind of technology is what this fund focuses on. And the kind of technology that we want to do is across themes. It is not across only internet or online firms. It is across the breadth and length of the economy. So that is how it is different from a pure IT or a technology fund.
Okay. So, besides volatility, what are the other risks investor must consider before, say, investing in this fund?
See, this is a fund where traditionally or in the last 10 to 15 years, this space has seen a lot of interest by investors by the way of participating in large companies. So, for example, the erstwhile FANG companies, or not erstwhile, the current market leaders, the FANG companies over the last 14-15 years have delivered tremendous value to their investors, right? And the indices which are dominated by these companies have again being a big source of investment returns. The idea is that how do you capture that kind of a return? So to capture that kind of a return, you have to today know who will be the, let's say, Steve Jobs of the future. You have to know who will be the Elon Musk in 2030. And ideally, we don't know, right? There is no way to know who will be the big leaders of the corporate world, who will be the big companies of 2030. So the idea is to diversify into companies which are probably going to be in that space in the future. So you buy a number of companies which have all the conducive conditions to become the leaders of tomorrow, right? So we don't know who they will be, but we know what are the conditions, and we bet on those conditions and a number of these companies. So that takes care of the volatility or the firm level risk, which is one of the most important aspects when you play innovation, because many companies don't exist over a period of time. So you would have heard about a number of companies which were doing very well. Let's say in the e-commerce market, there are many examples in the Indian space itself. A company does brilliantly over a 2-3 year period, becomes a sizable portion of the market, and then eventually it goes away. It goes bust or doesn't do as well as it should have done. So there is an inherent risk in these themes, and therefore you cannot have a concentrated portfolio. So as you ask, what are the key risks? I think one of the biggest risks is, of course, the volatility that comes with stock price of these companies. Generally, it is more volatile than the market. The second risk is the actual business risk is quite high because these companies are operating in uncharted territories. They're trying to do things which are new. So there is always the risk of running out of capital or running out of ideas. So those risks are very important and you have to diversify them.
Okay. So finally, Sahil, we would like to know, so to take advantage of this fund, what investment horizon should an investor keep in mind when investing in this NFO?
I think the minimum period that I think that comes to my mind is roughly 5 years. because it takes time for innovation to take charge, and then it fructifies over a period of time. Then it becomes a business idea, and then it becomes profitable. So there is a whole cycle. We'll also have a lot of investment ideas, right? And those investment ideas will probably deliver a number of large caps of the future. Right now, these companies have become incorporated in the last 5 years or 6 years. Some of them are small caps, some of them are mid caps, a few of them are smaller large caps, right? But they will become mega caps over a period of time. So this fund will try to capture these kind of uh, businesses, and that is how I think the opportunity will come out. So this is one example. There are a number of similar example in every theme that we picked, and I think this is one of the base case on how this theme will fructify across different teams.
Okay. I mean, those were some interesting set of answers. Thank you so much for joining in, Sahil. It was such a pleasure to have you, and we wish you all the best from Upstox for the NFO.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Brokerage shall not exceed SEBI specified limit. Investment in securities market are subject to market risk. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.